It is a narrow line between justice and vengeance. Crovax, flavor text of Urborg Justice. The Bloodlines project was one of ambition to create the perfect soldier. Urza worked behind the scenes for decades, influencing the union of select individuals across Dominaria. This eugenics program, for that is what it was, had many and far-reaching effects, one being the indirect way it turned families across the plane into targets for Urza's hated enemies, the vile Phyrexians. One such family, a family that had largely fallen to decadence, resided on the swampy island of Urborg, and it is into this family that one of the potential champions of the Bloodlines project, a man named Crovax, would be born. The young Crovax always had a strained relationship with his family, particularly his father, and grew up with a jaded disposition towards his heritage. One of the few sources of joy in his life came in the form of Selenia, a guardian angel that watched over his family, bound to serve the one who wielded the artifact that contained her. With no love for his family and few connections to the outside world, Crovax quickly became enamored with the angel, though was surely dismayed when she seemed incapable of returning his affections. This one-sided love became an obsession of sorts, and when the opportunity came for Crovax to leave the island aboard the Weatherlight, he practically jumped at the chance, taking Selenia's artifact and leaving his family behind. Crovax's poor social skills, stemming from his largely isolated youth, made fitting in with the crew a difficult task. He often came off as reclusive to his crewmates, but they also recognized him for his skill in combat and handiness aboard the skyship, making him a valuable member of the team. Two of the few friends Crovax would eventually gain came in the form of Vorthos, a Llanowar elf, and Gerard, another product of the Bloodlines project, and the one to whom, it seemed, the legacy was gifted as birthright. Over time, Crovax warmed up to the rest of the crew, except for Squee, the goblin, whom was always a pest and an annoyance in his eyes. Under Captain Sisse, the Weatherlight crew journeyed across Dominaria, retrieving pieces of the legacy for a time, until one day, when Crovax learned that his father had been killed. The Weatherlight returned to Crovax's family home to find it under attack by the horrors of Phyrexia, specifically a pair of monsters known as Gallowbraid and Morinfen. As it turned out, without the protection of Selenia, Crovax's family was easy prey for the Phyrexians. A battle broke out between the Weatherlight crew and the monsters, a battle which slowly looked to be unwinnable. The Phyrexians had the upper hand, and during the fighting, Raphelos, one of Crovax's few friends, was slain. Desperate, Crovax turned to his guardian angel, his lifelong love for aid. Using the family artifact, Crovax summoned Selenia, who was able to defeat and drive away the monsters. In the aftermath of the battle, Crovax, who wanted so desperately for Selenia to be with him, to stand beside him, and to love him not out of obedience, but by choice, destroyed the artifact that contained the angel, to his dismay, however, Selenia would disappear with hardly a word. Crushed by the loss of his friend and the object of his affections, Crovax was among those who left the Weatherlight crew, alongside Gerard and Miri. He elected to stay on his family land, claiming it was his duty, though it's possible Crovax simply desired to be alone in his misery. On Urborg, Crovax would become more miserable day by day, isolated and with nothing to bring him joy. Slowly, in his dark estate, a madness began to claw at the edges of his mind. These days of solitude and despair would not last. By the time he was 36 years old, Crovax was approached by his old friend, Gerard, who was seeking crewmates for the Weatherlight. Cisse, their old captain, had been kidnapped, and Gerard intended to enter the Plane of Wrath to save her. Though his heart had turned dark, Crovax could not refuse the request of his friend, and so joined the Weatherlight crew one more time. One last time. Once the crew had passed over into Wrath, the Weatherlight came under attack by the Predator, Volrath's flagship. Here, Crovax was shocked to learn that Selenia was among those attacking the Weatherlight, as she now served Volrath. Tahngarth and Karn, members of the crew, were taken by Volrath's men, and Gerard fell into the forests below. Though Crovax did not take part in this first battle, he found his motivation redoubled, fueled by a desire to save his comrades, and a fury at Selenia's betrayal. After retrieving Gerard from the forest below, the Weatherlight crew made their way into Volrath's stronghold, fighting their way past the traps and servants of the Evincar. It would not be until after their friends were retrieved in the dungeon that Crovax and Selenia would be reunited. A battle broke out between the Angel and the crew, and Miri was badly injured in the fight. Enraged at the Angel's betrayal and refusing to allow another friend to die, Crovax slew Selenia. Pain, anguish, misery. Selenia burst apart like a glass sculpture. The shards of the defeated angel embedded themselves into Crovax's flesh, and it was then that he came to the realization that he was cursed. At last, consumed by misery, Crovax attempted to jump to his death, but Tahngarth intervened, and Crovax's unconscious form was taken back to the Weatherlight. As the Weatherlight made its escape from Volrath's realm, Crovax awoke below deck, plagued by voices. Delirious, he rose and made his way above deck, where he found himself compelled to sabotage the vessel. It was only with the timely intervention of Miri, who was suspicious of Crovax's actions, that his sabotage was foiled. The two grappled and fell into the forest below, while the Weatherlight disappeared on the horizon. It was only here, under the dark canopy, where the full extent of Crovax's curse became apparent. Slaying Selenia had been an act that eternally condemned the warrior. He was now a dark and twisted vampire, full with a brutal hatred for life, a hatred that he took out on Miri, his former friend. Shortly after, the blast of the planar portal closing would knock Crovax off of a cliff. Death was not the vampire's fate, however. No. Destiny had something far darker in store. Crovax awoke in Phyrexia, greeted by the source of the voice in his head, the ineffable, the Lord of the Wastes, the god of Phyrexia, Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth revealed to Crovax that he had a plan in mind for the vampire. Crovax, former warrior of the Weatherlight, was to become the new Evincar of Wrath. Before he could ascend, however, Crovax would be tasked with proving himself worthy of the position. He would face trials, combating others who also desired the title. Crovax underwent completion, becoming a true Phyrexian in body and mind. He became stronger, more durable, mastered his vampiric abilities, and gained several other powers. Through this transformation, his morals were torn away, and Crovax truly became a ruthless, monstrous vampire. With the Phyrexian Belb overseeing the competition, Crovax challenged his rivals in combat. Grevin Ilvek was a commander who served under Volrath, and Urtai was a wizard who, alongside Crovax, once served aboard the Weatherlight. Crovax had victories and defeats, facing many challenges not just from his rivals, but from uprisings and rebellions occurring across Wrath that he had to deal with, sometimes successfully, other times not. Throughout it all, Crovax repeatedly tried to force Belm to recognize him as the Evincar, but she refused. In the end, Crovax led a rebellion against Belb, one that only succeeded because he threatened the life of Urtai, with whom the Phyrexian overseer had grown close. Belb finally relented and agreed to declare Crovax as Evincar. On the day of Crovax's coronation, however, everyone present was surprised when Volrath, who had departed to chase the Weatherlight, returned. Belb took the opportunity and declared that Crovax and Volrath must duel to the death for the title of Evincar, a duel both warriors gladly participated in. The two seemed to be evenly matched, with Volrath's skill and experience giving him a slight edge over Crovax's sheer brutality. But the vampire gained more power by slaying bystanders and, in the end, though Volrath still had an upper hand, he mysteriously faltered. Urtai, in an attempt to win Crovax's favor, had intervened, and the vampire slew Volrath. With this final victory, Crovax was now in total control of the Plane of Wrath, and his rule was one of total dominance. The vampire suppressed rebellions, crushed resistance, and generally ruled the world as an insane tyrant. His brutality aimed at anyone, for any reason. Ruling from the stronghold, Crovax's might was absolute. During this reign, the Evincar was rewarded by Yawgmoth with a reborn Selenia. In truth, a simple recreation without any real essence, who was routinely gifted to Crovax whenever he satisfied his lord's demands. The greatest task set for the vampire now was preparing for the day of the invasion. Wrath was to be used as the staging ground, with a planar overlay to be used to transport troops directly onto Dominaria as the worlds merged. Crovax was responsible for organizing and disciplining such troops, preparing them for the invasion. When the overlay occurred, the stronghold manifested inside of an active volcano on Ermborg. From here, Crovax commanded the Phyrexian attack on his former home, converting his family estate into a shrine that idolized himself. The Evincar participated little in the war, save when he saw fit to execute those that failed him, like Sabo Tavok, but his role was not isolated to observation. After another run-in with the Predator, Gerard found himself transported into the stronghold, courtesy of Urtai, where he encountered Crovax face to face. The former friends fought briefly, but the Evincar was able to convince Gerard to switch sides, to join Yawgmoth in order to revive his love, the recently deceased Hannah. Gerard would give himself over willingly to Yawgmoth, and Crovax would be rewarded once again. Squee, the pest he had hated so much, was handed over to him as an eternally reviving immortal. The Evincar could experience the joy of slaughtering the goblin repeatedly, something he truly came to enjoy. While Gerard entered Phyrexia to face his own trials, Crovax resumed the invasion, even personally battling against the forces of Yavimaya. But he would soon enough return to the stronghold when he received a distress call from Urtai. To his shock, the vampire discovered Gerard had returned from Phyrexia, more powerful than before thanks to Yawgmoth's blessing, yet denying the Ineffable's bargain. Once again, Crovax and Gerard fought, and though Crovax was mighty and savage, blessed with many abilities, Gerard was more skilled, and the strength he received from Yawgmoth was enough to overcome his former friend. Crovax was pushed back, wounded, and ultimately cut in two. A life of solitude, sadness, anger, and madness. A life that saw him a hero of the Weatherlight and a killer of millions came to an end. While Gerard stood over the body of his former friend, he was stunned to see the form of Selenia, the true Selenia, not some creation of Yawgmoth's, descend over Crovax to lift and carry his soul away. It was only then, in death, that Crovax once again appeared as the young man Gerard had known not that long ago. Crovax is one of the central characters in the Weatherlight saga, and his tale is an unfortunate one. His life, in the end, was cursed, and while he certainly had the potential to rise up and be a great hero, just like Gerard, fate had other plans in mind. In another timeline, Miri would be the one to slay Selenia in Crovax's stead, and she would be the one to harbor the vampiric curse as a result. In this timeline, Crovax would go on to truly shine as a great hero that brightened up the dark days of the invasion. But that timeline, sadly, can never truly be. Crovax has had 3 depictions in the game so far: Crovax the Cursed, Ascendant Evincar, and Crovax Ascendant Hero. The first 2 cards depict him after slaying Selenia and after becoming Evincar respectively, while the 3rd card shows us what he could have been had history taken a different turn. Crovax was one of the most noteworthy members of the Weatherlight crew, and over the past few years, members have received new, sometimes improved cards. Who knows? We may not have seen the last of this warrior turned Phyrexian. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like or sharing this video with your friends. If you're a fan of the Weatherlight, its crew, or the Weatherlight saga as a whole, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. I'll be releasing more videos on this topic. Finally, this video is brought to you by my patrons. If you enjoy my work and would like to support me, head on over to my Patreon. A link to it will be in the description below. Thanks again, and have a great day.